All right, hello out there, everybody. We're back today, and this time we're not live. We got a special episode because they're just not available today, but wanted to leave you with something. So today I wanted to just talk to Jason Story. We're going to go over a couple things I've been kind of curious about and learn a little bit more about just coding and his story in general. So I guess it'll be the story of Story. But first, I wanted to let you know that the Ultimate Game Dev course is now live. For those of you who don't already know, the Ultimate Game Dev course is a huge online course where my friend Thomas Brush and I have bundled all of our courses together at an extremely low price. Combined, the program's over 120 hours and it's still growing every week. Whether you're just looking to advance your skills or have never looked at code before, this course will give you the tools that you need to advance your game dev career and take you one step closer to building and releasing your dream game. With my courses, I'll take you all the way from the very fundamentals of C# coding and Unity development to using Unity on a professional level. You'll learn hundreds of topics from simple things like raycasting, animation, and particle effects to advanced AI, multiplayer, design patterns, and even project planning. We'll cover everything: 2D, 3D games, top-down games, action games, first-person shooters, and even full-on role-playing games. When you finish with my courses, you can polish up your games with the amazing art skills you've learned from Thomas's high-quality art tutorials. On top of this, Thomas will teach you everything about marketing your game, working with publishers, crowdfunding, and even his tried and true secrets to get your game on the Steam front page, just like he's done with his own successful game releases. So when you're ready to launch your game, you'll know exactly what to do. You'll also get invitations for 2 amazing Discord communities filled with industry professionals and like-minded developers, where you can share your work, get help, and bounce around ideas. With my courses, you'll also have direct access to me all along in case you have a problem that you just can't solve. The course will only be live for 30 days, and there are only 300 seats to ensure that everyone gets the best experience possible. So grab a seat before they run out. So thanks again, Jason, for agreeing to do this with like zero notice. Kind of bombed you right in the middle of a Q&A call.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, anyway, I wanted to just kind of catch up and I guess let everybody get a little bit more introduced to you and find out a little bit more about you myself. Because, I mean, we've been talking forever, but I don't really know a whole lot about your history with getting started programming and getting started into code and kind of like what led you to doing the stuff that you're doing now. So I guess if you don't mind sharing, can we just kind of start off with like, when was the first time that you actually wrote some code or thought about, computer programming or software engineering or any of that kind of stuff? Like, what was your first exposure to that when you were, I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, I would say, so as a kid, I was always the techie kid. Some people are intuitively, they just like that sort of stuff. So I always liked gadgets and toys and that kind of thing. And when I had a chance and I got my first computer, and you're looking at the web, I wanted to make my own website. That's like the first thing that comes to mind. I want my own website. Now, I'm dating myself a bit, but at the time, I was using a free angelfire.com website. It was web hosted for me, and I was learning HTML4, which is the popular one at the time. And I was also doing a bit of DHTML, which is dynamic HTML, which has a whole lot of like marquees and crazy stuff. So it was all gaudy, horrible websites. And so I used to go to my local library. I didn't actually have a computer myself at the time, but I was sort of getting into computers from school. We had a couple of classes. And so I would go visit the local library, and I would like take hours at a time. I would go onto the Angelfire website and start writing HTML and making marquee text and scrolling horrible messes was my introduction.
Nice. How old were you then?
Oh, God, would have been 12 or 13, I think. Yeah.
I always forget how young you are.
Yeah, I had a running deal with the librarians, which was I was able to fix computers just generally. And I say fix computers. Anybody who's ever had a computer these days, I'm talking about like using the registry cleaner or, defragging a hard drive or the really basic stuff that realistically isn't fixing a computer. It's just doing the stuff like deleting the toolbars that are slowing it down or the other silly stuff. And so because of that, they didn't have a tech person on staff. It was just a row of computers in a small library. And so I basically they made a deal with me and said, look, you're only supposed to have an hour or 2 per day per person. If you want to sit here and use it all day, unless someone else wants it, you can, providing you fix any problems anybody has. I'm like, you know what? That's a deal I'll take. So I basically got sort of free access used to the computers there, and worked on my worked on my silly projects.
Yeah, it sounds like a good deal though. Getting the free unlimited access. That's not, so you were about 12, huh, when you first started, and that
Yeah,
was just primarily web stuff then? So you just
yeah.
what did you
So
want to make a web page for? Like what was the goal? Like why
well,
did you
this is embarrassing, but the reason why I wanted to make a website is my favorite show at the time was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I was making a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan website. So that's what I was doing with my time. Um, and it had like
Another
all
one of
the
my friends, I believe, did the same thing. I'm gonna go
yeah,
talk to Reg this week and see. Maybe we can. I can introduce you guys. You can bond on Buffy. I'm
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
sure he
exactly.
made a Buffy the Vampire Slayer web page, fan page himself, and group.
He probably got a lot further than me. I didn't actually get very far with mine. It was just marquee text, some icons, and various like sound effects and stuff. I never really got very far. It wasn't until I moved away from that stuff and ended up using level editors in games like Tony Hawk's and started building level stuff that I got really interested in making my own content. And so I'd say the first coding stuff I ever did would have been working with an app called ZQuest. And ZQuest is this really old app, which is like a little editor for Zelda Classic, like the original Zelda with the sword, and where you go into the old man gives you your sword. That original Zelda, there's an editor tool you could get that would basically let you take that map and paint your own tiles and write your own little tiny scripts of logic. I think it was, I can't remember what it was in. It might have been Lua or something. I can't remember, but it was basically mostly you could download other people's sprite packs, other people's levels. You could write scripts, and it was just a level editor for this. And I just had a lot of fun trying to replicate various Zelda mechanics and that. That was probably the first gamey stuff I did.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. Just being when you can get in, if it's a game that you actually like, and you can get in and mod it and play with it. And modding is one of the things that I think gets a lot of people into game
Mm.
development. It was one of the things that kind of pushed me forward and made me realize that I really could kind of play around with actual games and do things in there and make stuff happen. So I'm not
I don't
surprised.
appreciate how easy it is now, though, because back in my day, what I used to do was I had a computer but no internet. Like most people didn't have the internet. There was two places I could use internet: the local library, which was in town, or I could go to a friend's house if he was around and let me use the computer. And so what I used to do is I would save up my money from doing chores and things, and I would hitch into town because I didn't want to waste money on the bus. So I would literally get a ride from strangers to go into the center of town, and I would go to an internet cafe and I would sit there paying my $4 to $5 an hour to sit at a computer, and I would bring with me 45 floppy disks in a container, and I would sit at the computer and I would download sprite packs and art and video tutorials and all this stuff. And then, because they were too big, because a floppy disk is 1.44 megabytes, what you had to do is if you had like a 3 megabyte video or a zip file that had a bunch of art assets, you had to split it up. So I used a tool called HJ Split that would let me choose a size, split them up, and then divvy up these like few sprite packs and things over the 30 floppy disks I brought in. And then I'd bring them home, reconstitute the files back, and then I would have access to my new content of stuff. But I learned a valuable life lesson, which is if you fill a floppy disk to full, it can corrupt the data. So you have to always leave about a megabyte or two as like or not a megabyte because it was 1.44, about 0.02 or whatever free. Because if you didn't, you would have this 30 disk collection you'd bring home. And if any one of them corrupts, the entire package is corrupt because it's not really the files, it's a compound archive that's been divided. So I literally lost entire days as a kid. I'd go and spend multiple hours sitting there downloading files, get home, and I would end up with nothing for it because one of the disks corrupted. So yeah, it was a different time.
Yeah, back in the old days, I'm just thinking like there are going to be a lot of people watching, listening. That are like, "Oh, you had internet back then." Like, but I remember, like the first, even pre-internet, or at least pre my internet access, just getting on BBSs and doing the same thing with floppy disks. I had the big old box full, like
Yeah,
held
yeah.
50 floppies. It was fucking amazing. I made it held 100 because like who doesn't need 100 floppy disks? Sit there, pop it in, come back 10 minutes later, pop in the next one. I remember installing Windows or like 38 disks or something like that, or
Yeah,
60
yeah.
when you did NT. It was nuts. You'd sit there. It was an all-day process of just swapping disks to install an operating system, and then downloading stuff. Whew. That was always Not fun. And then my mom would pick
No.
up the phone. Jason, I
Then
need
you're
to use
done.
the
Yeah.
phone. I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah.
in the middle of downloading this game. You don't understand, mom. You don't need to talk to people. It's not that important. You could just go to their house or something.
That's one of the magic of peer to peer. The reason peer to peer was so cool, it wasn't just that you were sharing files with people, it's that the files were shared in parts. So you could actually pause a download, which was so crazy at the time because it used to be you tried to download a large file, and if it breaks at any point, you're done. All of that progress is gone. And so being able to like pause a download partially through was absolute magic. It was great.
Yeah. So when did you jump into just writing
Oh, actual
actual
code.
code? So
Yeah, I
you
would
were doing
say
some odd stuff. What was the transition there?
the transition was Newgrounds, which I think I'm not the only person who could say that. Newgrounds was my big introduction to actual coding. It's so Newgrounds was a Flash-based website where people would just make these really weird little demos, ranging from games to just cartoons or whatever else they wanted to make. And it sort of it almost worked more like a video editor than a code editor because you had a timeline and you'd create sprites on the timeline and then you would write scripts behind the sprites, kind of like the way you do scripts behaviors on objects. And so when I first got into it, I actually wasn't doing it for the code. I was doing it like keyframing objects. I would make a circle, I'd drag it across the screen, I would set a couple of seconds in, I'd place a new position, I'd animate it, I'd put some sound effects on the timeline, I'd do some stuff. And then at some point I wanted to like control it with a mouse or control it with a keyboard or something. And so you had to write an ActionScript. And ActionScript was the Flash language at the time. And you basically just wrote really simple scripts like key up 12 if do such and such. And it was very, very simple logic. But it did get me introduced to the general concepts of writing things that check distances to do your own collision checks or writing stuff that did keyboard input checks and things. And what was really fun, which is I think I actually really miss, it's something I wish was more of now, is you could actually play Flash games, which were live tutorials for making stuff in Flash. You would play a game, which is like a little character that would just run across the screen, and there'd be text boxes floating in the sky that would be the line of code he used to make the jump or to make the whatever. And so there was these little interactive demos that would teach you how to do it. So you would play those, you'd bring up your Flash editor, and you'd start trying to figure out how he did it and like how to make a key in a door and stuff. You pick up the key and you'd open the door, and then there'd be a line over the door that says if key equals collected or whatever, some kind of thing like that. So yeah, it was
That's
fun.
really cool. So people just is that something that they made, or is it just something that people started creating, like these
Oh, it was just
how to learn
random
code?
people. There
Wow.
was a whole lot of stuff like it was all really janky too. Like there was people who would make like there was sprites ripped from games where you'd be playing as Link in some unofficial little demo with techno music playing in the background with like guides to writing code written on the front of it. It was so weird. I actually saved a bunch of those because for nostalgia reasons, but they were they were good times.
That is definitely cool. It's really neat how people would just kind of come together and make all that stuff too, and just make these tutorials on a platform like that completely free. That shit is impressive.
And
So
if you're
when
not familiar with games like that too, the creator was Tom Fulp. He was the guy who made the Newgrounds site. And if you've ever played Alien Hominoid or Castle Crashers, they were like the original Flash game. So it was all that sort of style of stuff.
Yeah, those are all a lot of fun. I know a lot of people started their kind of game development career that way too. I think it's just because it's easy to get in, and Flash was so huge. Now I wonder what people like
Yeah.
today are starting learning. Are they doing something similar? Are they jumping straight into something else like Unity, or are they using some of these other sites? Because there's a lot of tools out there. There are a whole lot of sites out there that will teach you how to write code and allow you to kind of build it and play with it.
Khan
So
Academy, Code Academy, there's loads of those. I would say though,
yeah.
so I don't think people realized back then too that Flash Player, the reason why it was so popular, it had at one stage 97% market saturation. Like think about that. Not even Facebook has that on people's accounts and things. Like Facebook is huge. Facebook has like 70%, but 97%. The reason why is it was basically pre-installed on a lot of computers. It was also required for almost any website. At the time there was tons and tons of interaction content. Um, and eventually it was so insecure and badly written that that people moved away from it. But it was the main thing to do it. And I think these days the answer is probably Roblox because the way people engage with apps like that, it's not quite the same code environment type thing, but it's very much a learn to mess with games and make cool stuff and sort of teach yourself about the concepts of logic and conditionals and whatever. So I would say it's probably things like PlayStation Dreams and Roblox and these sorts of game level design. Mario Maker, these kinds of things are probably where people are starting to reason out these sorts of things for the first time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially like the maker ones, but just thinking of Roblox, it is huge. It's weird because it's not something I've played a lot, but I know people who've worked on it, and I know a lot of people who play it themselves, and it seems like it's just enormous. I saw they IPO'd, and I bought 2 shares of it, and they've gone way up. So who knows?
It's one of the largest games in the world right now. I think it's like literally in the top 12 games ever in terms of player bases and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense that it probably is a great place for just learning that stuff because you get to build it and you already have a game. I think like the benefit there of like making a mod or working in something like that is that you don't have to start from scratch. Like you don't have to like I've got a blank slate and I build whatever I want, which is a lot of fun when you're a programmer and you've got a lot of experience. Like, hey, blank slate, I can do whatever the hell I want. But when you don't have that and you're trying to learn out, I think that having that pre-built world there in the pre-built game and you're just kind of adding on to it and then morphing it and changing it, it's a lot less daunting and easier to get into.
Yeah. It also lets you keep your motivation because that was one thing that really killed me about this stuff was Flash was great because it's immediate. You could like download people's assets, add some scripts to it, and just make things spin and rotate and play sounds or whatever. But when I finally migrated from that and went, okay, this is fun, I want to do it for a career, I went to college to learn programming, and the first language we were taught was VB.net, which I hated. It was just the syntax was horrible. It was messy. It just wasn't worth using in my opinion.
It's Visual
But
Basic, right?
yeah, Visual Basic. Yeah, it's a .NET version of it, but yeah, it was Visual Basic at the time. Dark Basic was used for games, and then Visual Basic was used for like computer apps and that kind of thing. Um, but I hated it. So what ended up happening is as we moved on, we started switching to other languages and other stuff. We learned Java. Was my first language. My proper language was Java. But at the time, we were also doing a little bit of other languages like C Sharp. And so for gaming, we were learning XNA, XNA 1.0, and that was Microsoft's game engine. And to bring it back round, just like what you were saying, the way XNA worked is you didn't even have the concept of animated sprites or anything. You had an image. You could draw an image on the screen. And you didn't have the concept of button down or button pressed. You had a concept of button is pressed or not pressed. If you wanted to actually do a click or a press or a hold, or so something as simple as I want this character to move across the screen and jump, you had to write from scratch an array of sprites, write a timer, iterate the sprites, play and animate them all using a sprite batch. Then as they moved, you had to write an input that would capture the input this frame, capture the input previous frame, compare the two frames of input, check if the state had changed to pressed or not pressed. If it has, then do your calculation to add your velocities and things, and then apply it and move your sprite. And all you've got now is a non-colliding moving rectangle. Like that's all we've gotten after all of this work. So it was very demotivating, the amount of effort required to get the most basic of things working. So yeah, these days, like Unity's magic. The amount of stuff you can just drop in and instantly have giant projects full of stuff.
Yeah, I remember that with XNA. It was there was a lot of work you had to do anything, but then occasionally you'd get that exciting reward of look at this, it's playing on an Xbox though, right? It's like, oh, like it's a lot of work and it's very complicated and I barely get anything, but I can play it on my Xbox, and that's a first because it was when XNA first came out, it was kind of the first publicly available way for a person, just a regular old developer, to put something out onto a console without buying a dev kit and getting like a big giant
Mm.
contract. So you could actually deploy to their XNA. I forget, they had like a whole separate marketplace for a while where they
XNA
kind of
Creators Club, yeah, and
yeah.
that was actually my favorite community I've been in as a kid because Flash was great, but Flash was weird. The Newgrounds Flash subreddits and stuff, or not subreddit, but the communities felt like Reddit. It had that sort of insular, self-contained sort of weirdness to it, which is fun, like it's part of being an in crowd, but it's not very learning friendly. It's more learning as a side effect of being part of the community. Instead, though, Creators Club really felt like a bunch of students all sharing information and linking to cool stuff and trying to figure stuff out together. So that was a really fun place to be, sort of learning games.
Yeah, it was definitely a cool time and a cool, I think, release. I remember it also supported Windows Phone too, XNA. I think it may have been one of the later versions. So I jumped onto that and I was like, I already know XNA, so why don't I make something for Windows Phone? Again, the platform died, but the projects were interesting and it was fun to learn that and, do okay in there because the marketplace was relatively tiny, right?
And it's not like it's gone completely. Like there is still stuff. For example, Terraria is basically built on XNA, so there's still games that are out there using it. It's just not as sounds prevalent as it once was.
Yeah, it's definitely not something I would recommend jumping into now. Right now, I'd just go with a game engine. The game engines are available. Back then, they weren't so available. They were expensive and closed off. Or Unity was available, but it was very, very primitive at
Unity
the
was
time.
terrible. I'll be honest. Back
Yeah.
then, Unity was Unity actually felt a lot like, so Unity and Silverlight were both competing to replace Flash. They were basically the who's going to take the throne. This used to be the web interactive content provider was Flash. It had 97% accuracy of of market saturation. Once it died, everyone's like, well, who's next? Who's the big guy who's going to take over? And the problem was, for each of these, you had to install plugins. Something we have these days is HTML5 canvas, where the browsers themselves can render content. Back then, you had to install an app that would kind of host content in the browser. And so it didn't work as well because it was a lot harder to get people who are not computer savvy to like download and install plugins that would render things on their pages and do different stuff. So it was an interesting space, and Unity at the time was almost web only. I don't think it even had a desktop build. I think back then it was literally just an in-browser plugin, and it was terrible. It could render some like shapes basically and do some really laggy code, but it wasn't anything valuable. And so at the time, I remember the first game engine I properly used outside of XNA was UDK, so the Unreal Development Kit, and that was basically Unreal Tournament, but you could open it, which was crazy. And so you would download the UDK engine, and it was the free version at the time of Unreal Engine 3. So Unreal Engine 3 was closed. You couldn't get your hands on it. It's not like these days you can just download it yourself. You had to like be a game studio, license it, and get the download. They wouldn't give it to you unless you already had paid their enterprise prices. But UDK was like you can learn on this until by the time you get in the industry, you can then switch to the real one. And so I played around with that, and I added stuff like building my neighborhood using BSP brushes, which are sort of like additive and subtractive blocks, and putting cars in it and doing post-processing effects and learning all of that stuff. So that's my first proper game stuff I got into was editing the maps in Unreal Tournament.
Nice. I remember Unreal's editors and just all those FPS editors in general kind of like led the way, I think, for open game engines and making it more available. But I also remember the insane attempts to download and get those engines like as a kid, like
Yeah, yeah.
hopping onto all these hacker BBSs. Like, look, we found the code for this engine. It's like some like uncompilable thing that we can't even understand the littlest bit of. But it's just memories, man. Bringing back so much.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really funny too. There's so much that I got wrong as well. Like I think back, and one of my favorite memories, as silly as it is. So actually, and here's a fun thing where it was like Kismet for me. Which actually, speaking of Kismet, Kismet was the name of the editing the scriptable language that they were using back in the day. Was I was using UDK, but because I had previous history working in Newgrounds and Flash, if you've ever seen a game which has Scaleform UI written in the corner, Scaleform UI is the UI platform that has that like cool interactive 3D world space UI stuff that old games used to have. Because and the way it worked was it would render a canvas that showed a Flash game on it. So you actually would make a Flash file and load it onto a material, and that would display inside UDK. And so I was like, this is amazing. Here in college, we're all learning about UDK, and I already know how to make Flash games that I can embed inside of my game, and I can make like I think I made things like elevators with menus that had buttons that would animate, and you could swipe and pick floors. And no one else knew how to do this, and I felt like a badass because I could leverage all of that Flash stuff that I'd learned before. And I made a level for Unreal Tournament that was two towers, two like 12-story towers side by side with bridges across the thing. And I had like one layer was entirely a maze, but every wall's destructible, so it was a maze you could break all the walls and fight in. One of them had like bouncy platforms you could bounce around on and stuff. All these different ideas. But I learned a valuable lesson about level design, which is we all made different levels, brought it in to college, and then we'd play everyone's levels in class, and everyone played my one. But I put two towers in like this giant flat plane outside, so dark, moody outside, two big towers, and everybody played outside. Not because they didn't think the towers were cool, but from a gameplay perspective, all of those cool things I put in, bouncy pads and mazes and stuff, they just objectively got in the way of the gameplay experience of running and shooting and having fun. And so I realized the coolness of my level designs was irrelevant in the face of what the player experience was like. And so I look back now and I can see all of the mistakes I made from a usability and level design perspective that I didn't understand at the time. And so it's funny how it's like it was completely wrong, but it taught me a lot about, now I know why people didn't engage with it in the way I thought they would when I released it, you know?
Yeah, that is some definitely good retrospective and just introspectiveness. I don't even know the right word there, but being that's impressive.
Yeah,
Thinking back
it
and
was
like
good.
remembering even to the details of why that was wrong and what was going
Mm.
on there. But I mean, we've been talking a lot about game design and level design, and to be honest, I think you're one of the best guys I know at that kind of stuff. So I'm not too surprised to hear hear that from you and
Well,
hear you
I
learn
will
a
say I
lot.
think about it a lot. For all that's worth, I do. I really enjoy the mental puzzle that is why do I like certain games? Why do I remember those the most? Or what levels are memorable, or various different things. And so it's been a fun journey to sort of peel back the layers about what stuff made an impact on me as a kid myself. You know.
Yeah. I totally get that. I like to think back about the old stuff that I played and the things that have kind of made me make the different switches into different things that I've done. The
Mm.
last thing I was kind of curious about was what drove you into Unity. I think this one I actually know the answer to, but I want to see if I'm right. So I'll let you tell me.
So
What
yeah,
was it that kind of made you like go? Because I know you were doing some enterprise stuff, right? You went
I
from there
was,
to
yeah. So
so,
funny enough, I went to college and had my course. Actually, it's right here. There we go. That's my degree. There you go. There's my college degree. And it says right there in the middle, computing with games development, back in 2011. Now, I only bring that up to show my course was game development. And I did almost no game development. We did a little bit of XNA, a little bit of UDK, and I left. And what I was actually skilled in by the time I finished was SQL and Java, which doesn't make me much of a game dev. And so I ended up going into enterprise. And to be honest, in retrospect, I fully respect that decision, because what I now realize is they weren't teaching me the fun toys I wanted to learn. They were teaching me what would get me a job. And that may have been a bit of a bait and switch and probably not fair, but the truth is I wouldn't be where I am today had I not learned more practical skills then. And so I did enterprise. I worked in a Japanese bank for a while. I worked on supermarket software, a bunch of other random things. And I tried getting back into Flash a while. Flash has now gone up to ActionScript 3, and I made like little tower defense games and things, but it never really stuck. I wasn't really interested in doing that full time. And then Unity, I kept checking in on it, but it was just so bad. Like, it was just really janky and bad for a long, long time. And then I left it. I just forgot about it and, did my enterprise work until the Oculus Rift Kickstarter. And the Oculus Rift Kickstarter was the thing that I was like, wait, VR is a thing? I'm now an adult in a suit sitting, well, I say an adult, I'm like in my 20s and I'm sort of like pretending I'm an adult. And I'm sitting there and I have disposable income for the first time in my life. And I look at the Kickstarter and I can go, I can afford this. And so I can like back this silly VR thing. And, Gabe Newell's in it and he's a legend and all this stuff. And it was like, so I backed that and I got my VR headset. And the first thing I thought is, I'm a programmer. I have a VR headset. I have to do something. Like, I can't not learn how to do something with this. And the easiest solution was Unity. It's just the best way to make VR content at the time, because there was the drop-in plugins and it made it work. And so that's what I started. I started by making really silly demos of like moving your head to avoid cubes and all sorts of other little things. And it ended up with me hanging out in the Oculus subreddit forums. And at the time, our Oculus had less than 3,000 people in it. It was just a really small little community of people. And because of that, you would just meet, you'd hang out and you'd meet people, and you'd have different chats. And then from there, there'd be meetups. And so one of the meetups was hosted by a couple of guys, Graham Gaylor and Jesse Chaudhry. Yeah. And basically, they had a little app, and it was a little app that you could all log into in multiplayer, and your characters were using I don't know if you remember, the Unity character in the blue shirt with the like spiky hair, like there's this cartoon guy. So imagine a room full of 10 of those using pun networking, and everyone's in T-pose, and it's just sitting in a circle talking using the voice chat. Yep. And there was like 10 of us, and we would meet up like every week or so, every couple of weeks in this thing. We just chat about VR in VR with this like really janky little setup. That app today is called VR Chat, and it's now considerably bigger than it was back then. but it was just one of those really fun things that's I kind of met a bunch of people there that I still know to this day that have gone and done different things in VR. And in the process of doing that, I would help people out. I'd be like, I'm a programmer. There's a lot of artists making cool stuff that can't code. And so I would be like, hey, I can write you code. Like, I'm sitting here, it doesn't bother me. And eventually, one of the guys I helped out, Nick Pittum, he was doing a have you ever seen the Ghibli in VR stuff? Like they have like the Studio Ghibli. There's like the giant Howl's Moving Castle. There's the Totoro experience. Any of the things that are VR Ghibli stuff is probably his stuff. And so I was trying these out, and they're really impressive. But the coding sucked. It was really like unresponsive raycasting that would like you'd have to hit the small dot against a button, and if you missed it, it wouldn't work, and it'd be really annoying. And so I was like, let me just code it for you. Like I'll do it for free. I just like I love the experience. I just wanted to not be really annoying to use, and so I offered to help out, and I did, and it worked better. We had a couple of different projects together, and then eventually there was a game jam. Oculus was hosting the Oculus Gear VR Jam, and they were offering prize money. And so they're trying to sell the mobile VR headsets. It has gone from the Oculus Rift. They're releasing their mobile stuff, and they want people to be on board with the mobile stuff. And so they're incentivizing people to make VR content. And he ends up getting a team together. And unbeknownst to me, he's got like a bunch of friends who are amazing artists, like people who've done concept art for Big Hero 6 and stuff, like people who know what they're doing. And he's got this group together, and he's like, oh, hey, we need a programmer. Do you want to be the programmer? I'm like, I can do programming. And so I joined the team, and I joined a bit late because they're already doing it a bit before I started, but there was kind of panicking, and we did so. It was a little project called Coloss. And effectively over the course of a few days, we did this game jam thing, and we won one of the awards. We won gold something. And basically they marketed it and they advertised it on the store and stuff. And the prize money ended up being like, I think it was like 30,000 for the team. But now we were one of those like bigger teams. Some people were doing one or two. We had like 10 people. So like it wasn't a lot of money all in. But fair play to a lot of the guys there. Some of them are professionals already. Like there was a guy, Joe Chen, and a few others who were like, they're already professional software people, and so to them that wasn't worth as much as like me, the guy like making my first ever game thing. And so a lot of people bowed out of the winnings and said, you know what, whatever, like just divide it between the rest of you. And so I ended up getting like 10,000 of that just to myself, and I was like, this is amazing. I did my first ever Unity thing, I had real artists doing fancy stuff, and I made a good amount of money out of it. So I was like, this is great. I want to do more of this. And then over time, whenever Nick would get contract work to do and he needed code, he'd hit me up and I would write code for him. And so over time, I was still doing my 9-to-5 job. I was still working in software development for doing supermarket data analytics, and we're doing cloud computing processing on things like buying trends, and that. There's a whole lot of stuff. We're doing lots of stuff. And while I was doing that, I would get like once every 2 months, there'd be a little bit of work here. That would be 1,000 here or 500 there or whatever. And then he eventually comes to me and says, I've just been offered a huge contract. We're making a art project to go to Cannes Lions Film Festival, like a big, decent thing that's like 6 months of work. And I want you to work with me. And I said, cool, yeah, I'll help out. He said, no, I need you full time for this. This isn't like you can't just do this on the side. And I was like, I don't know, man. I've got a job. I'm not really a risk taker. I'm not likely to do this. And he says the amount he quotes me is 2.5 times my annual salary for 6 months work. And I was like, I can't, how do you turn that down? And so I really fought with myself and said, this is a big change. I'll be like literally quitting my job to do this. And I eventually did. So I said, that's it. I'll quit my job. I'll do this. And if I can find another job within 2 years, I'm fine. I have 2 years now, free time to like find another job. And it just turned out ever since then, we just got more work and then referrals from clients, and people liked our stuff. And then we just kept doing it, just didn't stop. So that's kind of how I got into doing Unity things. So there you go. There's the long story.
It's got better and better, huh? That is really cool. That's an interesting and impressive story. So are you guys, just for anybody watching who is going to ask, are you guys available for more stuff too? Is there somewhere people could reach out?
Yeah.
Like,
so
I didn't think to ask you if this was okay to ask in this chat.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no.
If it's okay, I would be happy to we could put a link down there and people can contact you.
So Nick's studio is Fire Panda. It's an English basically software development firm. So firepanda.co.uk, and you can see pretty much all the projects we worked on that. We've done various different things for airlines and various art projects and museum installations and so much stuff over the years. And so you can see a bunch of it there. And yeah, if you reach out, if you've got a project you want done, we can look at quotes and figure out stuff. That's something we do from time to time. So.
Nice. That is really cool. Yeah, contracting is an interesting way to get into using the engine in general, and it's something a lot of people don't really think about. A lot of people think just like going straight into working at a AAA studio, but there's so many. Everybody I know does different stuff, and there's so many different things.
Yeah, it taught me the value of like a game engine may be called a game engine, but it's really a rendering engine with code, and the amount of problems you can solve with that are kind of crazy. Like I have done marketing material for airlines. I've like used AR stuff. I have done VR training stuff for military things. I've done museum installations to teach people about different locations in the world where you could like touch the map and it would like zoom in and do cool 3D stuff. I've done installations for events that would have like one of those giant 40-inch monitors that you could touch and interact with. That's basically like teaching you about cybersecurity. I've done like bar quizzes where it's just quiz questions and animated stuff that will come up. Like there's so many things that you can do in Unity that just aren't games, right? Like that are just using the tools.
Yeah, I see it everywhere. I think you can see it even more like in cars and just general tech out there. Like when I go out in public, like especially to techie events or anything where like I know they're doing newer stuff, but like a place like Disneyland or museums or any like event type stuff, I'm always just looking for, are they using Unity in this? Are they using Unreal, or do they do something else? Like which one of the three? Like did they make their own thing? They're using Unity or Unreal, and most of the time I find out like, oh, they're actually using Unity. And it's even weird. Like I've seen it at like doctor's offices, all kinds of random weird places I wouldn't expect. Like, oh, hey, this is a Unity app running. Like I'll see the whole thing going, and I look down there and I see the little Unity icon. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting.
And it's really for VR, I mean, not VR, for software development in general, that's something that has been really funny to me. Is I've now worked on a wider range of stuff, from web apps to desktop apps to mobile apps to, I've done stuff in native Java. I've done stuff using various different tools, WinForms, WPF, Angular, React, whatever. And so it gets to the point that you start to know your tools. And so just like you're saying, every time now I'm like going to a doctor's office, I'm like, that looks like Java X, the Swing library, and that's using, and you can kind of see what they're doing, and you can look at the different input boxes, and you recognize the colors and the styles, and you kind of know what's going on. It's a very fun thing to be able to like just deconstruct what you're using, all the software in your life. You start to see the pieces, you know.
Yeah, that was my favorite, was recognizing custom controls from WPF kits at a doctor's office.
Telerik.
Like, oh, they're using the Telerik controls.
Yeah. Telerik is the one.
Like, oh yeah, I literally like recognize these things. That's some weird nerd stuff, I guess. Anyway,
actually,
go ahead.
There was a game engine. I can't remember. There was one of the biggest voxel engines that was coming out a while ago. There was a voxel. I wish I could remember the name of it. But the first kind of commercially directed voxel engine, the one that was used for some MMO. I forgot which one it was. But that voxel engine had an editor to like build the maps in, and that editor was an embedded frame inside of WinForms application, which was using the Telerik tools. And it was so funny to me seeing this game engine, this like modern new thing dealing with cool technical voxel technology. And it's like, yeah, that's the Telerik ribbon bar right there with the Telerik tools, and I could spot there's the pagination thing they've got with the layout groups, and yeah, it's always been funny.
It is hilarious. That's probably how I would have built it back then too. Think about it. Cool. Well, thanks again, man, for coming out and doing this and just answering a lot of questions. Hopefully everybody kind of learned something. I know I definitely did and had a lot of fun with it. I think we'll be back next week, right?
Yeah.
And next week we'll give some tips too.
I have my tips library is growing every day, so I've got plenty to cover.
So again, I guess thanks everybody for watching and joining us. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button to like, subscribe, and check out the link below for all the different stuff. And then what was the page again? You're gonna say it one more time? People want to reach out.
Oh, so if you're just curious about what I'm doing and various guides and stuff, I use my Ko-fi link for that. But that's just ko-fi.com/JasonStory. But if you're wondering about contracting/job stuff, it's firepanda.co.uk. Just reach out there, and either myself or Nick will get back to you probably.
Great. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Don't forget to hit all the buttons and go share the video. And we'll see you again next week. And bye.
Good luck.
Also, don't forget to check out the Ultimate Game Dev course that's now live.